Rise of Nightmares is a 2011 Xbox 360 exclusive horror game that you've likely never played, and this is my review of the game over a decade after its release. Developed and published by Sega, this is a very interesting title and is one of the better Kinect games on the market in my opinion. I'm going to start my review by discussing the most important part of a horror game. Horror elements. Rise of Nightmares went above and beyond my expectations and is one of the scariest horror games on the 360. After playing the Kinect game Haunt, and just with what the Kinect is, I went into this game thinking there's no way this is going to be scary. I was very wrong. This title hit all of the checkmarks for a horror game. Creepy monster designs with putrid snarls and growls to make your skin crawl, literal pools of plasma that you have to walk through, tons of blood and gore in general, and I'm just getting started. Scary music to help set moods at certain points, an audio recording that I'm not sure if I'm allowed to describe on YouTube, jump scares, suspenseful moments. Rise of Nightmares went all in on horror and is one of the scariest Xbox 360 horror games that I have played, with the only real competitors I can think of being Silent Hill Homecoming and maybe Shell Shock 2. Now a quick note, I haven't yet played the Condemned games, but I've heard that they're terrifying. They're on my to play eventually list, but please don't comment something like, "You're wrong, Condemned is scarier." I'm gonna get to that one eventually. Anyways, I mentioned gore and monster designs, so let's dive more into that. Rise of Nightmares is an absolute bloodbath, and about on par with Killing Floor 1 with the sheer amount of bloodshed in this game. You can do several different types of dismemberments, decapitations, explosions, I don't know the word here, but you can throw explosions at monsters and leave nothing behind but a pile of limbs in a pool of crimson. You can also go ham with a chainsaw and some other weapon which was similar to a chainsaw. You get the idea. Sega held nothing back when it came to gore. And for monster designs, you mostly fight zombie-like creatures who can have things like mechanical limbs or weapons for limbs, or maybe metal armor grafted to them. And Sega definitely drew some inspiration from the nurses of Silent Hill for some of the female zombies, if you know what I mean. But some female monster designs made the SH nurses look like Sesame Street characters by comparison, and I'm 99% sure that I can't even show a couple of them on YouTube due to their adult-like presentation. And speaking of adult-like presentation, it's revealed that one woman character wants adult things with the monsters, and she does adult things with one of them. It's censored, of course, but I almost feel like Sega was toying with the idea of trying to go for an AO rating. But back to discussing the enemies of this game. Their presentation out of the way, they vary in danger levels with different attacks, like some only being able to bite and grab, while others can stab and slice. Some can vomit on you, making you blind, you had the odd siren on occasion, and then of course bosses, which are all pretty unique in my opinion. To top off the discussion of opponent variety, Rise of Nightmares also has a stalker enemy called Ernst for part of the game, who will one-hit you if he runs into you, and you cannot fight him back or escape. A little spoiler warning here, whoever wrote the story did an amazing job with writing Ernst, as I never thought I'd be sympathetic towards such a seemingly savage and mindless monster. On the surface, he just seems like another monster in the army of Dr. Victor, the main bad guy, but he retained a little bit of his humanity after being turned into a monster, and he helps your character escape one area after breaking free from a form of mind control. And then he's immediately murdered by Victor for his act of humanity. You can also learn in an audio tape that he gave his life so that his girlfriend or wife, it's not specified, could escape imprisonment by Victor. And that being said, I think that does lead me to attempt a full story summary. Keeping things as simple as possible, you play as a dude named Josh, who's traveling with his wife Kate on a train in Europe. when his wife is kidnapped by Ernst and Victor and the train crashes. Josh and several others survive, and they stumble across Victor's castle and are mostly captured, save one guy who was a bit more cautious. He helps Josh to escape, but is killed shortly after this, and Josh travels the castle, dungeon, dark science lab hybrid in search of his wife Kate, and learns of the horrible experiments that Victor has been doing on humans to more or less make an army of mutants. Josh eventually learns why Victor kidnapped his wife specifically, because she's pregnant, and Victor wants to take her life force in hopes of resurrecting his wife Mary, who he murdered. And I believe he wanted to claim her baby as his own after he accidentally unalived his own baby son in an experiment gone wrong. Josh goes through a lot of crap and is able to defeat Victor and save Mary, and the two escape. Although a post-credit scene makes it seem like Victor survived and that he will be coming back for round 2. That's a brief but good enough story rundown in my opinion. Now there is more to it than what I said, but I covered all the main points, but there were several moments that I simply did not see coming, and I was really surprised by how solid of a story this game had. Pretty much every Kinect game I'd played up to this point had little to no story, and to finally come across one which was actually really deeply and well written was a pleasant surprise. Shifting gears to other things, let's discuss combat and general gameplay. General gameplay consisted mostly of walking around, avoiding traps, pulling levers, and picking up items, and you can walk one of two ways. You can either hold one of your legs forward and hope you don't lose your balance, or hold your right arm up in some areas, which would trigger a much appreciated auto walk, so that you'd never get lost and or if the walking motion didn't want to read properly. As far as things like opening doors or dodging traps, you'll be given a prompt to maybe duck or step back, and interacting with things, well, it was usually pretty obvious as to what you should do, like moving your arm down to pull a lever. Oh, and you turn your shoulders to turn in-game, but this was really iffy, and I often just used the auto walk whenever it was an option. Now for combat, oh dear. This was interesting, to say the least. Basic combat is that you kick to kick and throw a punch to, punch, and you hold your arms in a X-cross to block, if that makes sense. If you have a weapon, you do whatever the appropriate motion would be to use it, like swinging your arm to use an axe or doing a throwing motion to toss explosives, but thrown weapons were insanely iffy, so I usually left them alone. Now I will get into weapon variety soon, but I want to finish talking about combat itself first. You can only hold one weapon at once, and it's always in your right hand, and it will break with enough use, so you gotta keep an eye out for new weapons, although things like brass knuckles will be equipped on both hands and not just in your right. Now in the later half of the game, you get an electric blast weapon wielded in your left hand, and you have to do this pose to charge a blast, and then you thrust your left arm forward to use it, and it can one-hit most enemies and destroy magic seals on doors. While it does have infinite ammo, you can only hold 3 blasts at once, and they take a couple minutes to recharge. All this discussed, the combat has a super mixed bag lock-on system for combat. So you raise your fist to enter a fighting stance, and the game will lock onto a nearby enemy, which can be helpful, but it would sometimes lock onto an opponent 20 feet away instead of the zombie that's right up in your face, and it is very hard to change the foe that you're locked onto. Being fair, I'm not really sure how this could have been improved, but combat didn't always work like it was supposed to, and most of my deaths came from iffy controls and misreads, which is probably my number one complaint with this game. Getting into the weapon variety, which I have brushed on, Rise of Nightmares has about everything that you can imagine. Machetes, axes, sickles, scalpels, lead pipes, metal baseball bats, chainsaws, shock sticks, shock knuckles, the limbs of your fallen enemies, etc., just to name some. of the weapons in this game, and I didn't even find every weapon in this game according to achievements, so who knows what kind of crazy weapons I missed out on. And sorry that I keep using the word weapon, I don't know what other word to use here. Anywho, the game uses achievements to encourage the player to try out all the weapons that they find, and I don't know if I personally had a favorite weapon. The chainsaw was really cool on paper, but it was a bit hard to use thanks to motion controls. But overall, Rise of Nightmares is one of the better Kinect games out there when it comes to how well the Kinect reads your movements. It's still not as accurate as something like Haunt or Ping Pong, but it's way better than games like Your Shape Fitness Evolved or Carnival games on the Kinect. And I think that covers all the main stuff. Some smaller notes I have would be that this game has unskippable credits, but thankfully they weren't too long. Also, after you beat the story, you unlock another game mode where you have to escape an area in 10 minutes while you get swarmed by hordes of enemies on the max difficulty. I didn't mess with this much, but it seemed fun enough. As far as, is this a good game for exercise? Kind of. It's not as intense as something like Fighters Uncaged, but it's more active than something like Darts vs. Zombies, so it kinda falls in the middle there. Graphics wise, this title looks great for a Kinect game, so that's good I reckon. And finally, this game has a basic regenerating health system, which I was very thankful for. I think this game would have been near unplayable if they'd gone for a medpack system or something like that. In conclusion, with all things said, this is a pretty solid horror game that I feel pushed the Kinect to its absolute limits, while still managing to be playable, and I give this title an 8.5 out of 10 by my grade scale. Still not my favorite Kinect game, but it's up there. A little side note apart from my review, this game came with 2 Avatar Award t-shirts, although I only unlocked one and it was kinda disappointing in my opinion. Still a nice bonus, but it wasn't quite as cool as I thought it would be. As far as similar games I can suggest, I'm going to say Haunt if you happen to buy it while it was still available, or maybe the House of the Dead remake. And I have reviewed Haunt, by the way, link to that review in the end card if you want to check it out. Whew. Alright, that's my review. Thanks for watching and for putting up with my horrible narration. As far as our Bible verse reading of today, I read James 5:12 NIV. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven, or by earth, or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you will be condemned. Okay, for anyone new here, I mostly review and discuss Xbox 360 games, so feel free to check out some of my other stuff if that sounds like your thing. And follow me on GameRam for hints at upcoming vids and behind the scenes stuff. Like always, none of my content is made by AI, and I don't consent to my voice and likeness being modified, altered, and copied by AI in any way. Jesus loves you all, have a good one, peace. Their presentation out of the way, they vary in danger. You can also learn in an